Good morning, New York, or should I say good afternoon, New York City, because it's been a fun-filled day of learning as well as we balance the severity of what is going on in New York City when it comes to mental health and the intersections of criminal justice. And we've had the opportunity today to hear about solitary confinement and the long-lasting impacts of isolation and the difficulty of reentry as a result, and other peripheral harms that come for those who are attached, those who experience that. We've talked about the mental health crisis response and the destigmatizing mental health and showing what it means to think differently about what it means to have public health that is elite and adequate for our community. And now we're turning to really put a huge focus on a very important issue around this whole subject, which is women. And we know that women's rights have been recently in the forefront with what's happening around Roe versus Wade. And it goes to show you that we are at a point where we need to put the focus on the experience of women. And I'm Solomon Acevedo, Deputy Public Advocate for Justice, Health, Equity, and Safety. And I am a man. And because of that, I am removed from the experiences of women. And so today we're going to kick it over to Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips to help guide the conversation with these amazing panelists who are here, who will introduce themselves shortly, and they will take the lead on letting us know what women need when it comes to the intersections of criminal justice and mental health. Dr. V.
Thank you so much, and peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you, Solomon, and thank you to the Office of the Public Advocate for collaborating today to make this happen. I am Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, and if you've joined for the previous two panels, I didn't take time to really introduce myself. So for this panel, I want to take a brief moment and say that I'm the founder and CEO of Visionary V Ministries, and I'm also known for the work I do throughout the city and with the Mental Health Project at the Urban Justice Center. I'm a criminal justice, mental health, reentry, and organizational behavioral consultant, certified neural coach, certified Reiki master, certified crisis response chaplain, and deaf doula, and co-chair to the New York City Department of Corrections Young Adult Task Force. And I'm super excited to once again moderate a panel today, but especially a panel designed to address the needs of our nurturers in the community, the women on Rikers Island, and what that looks like in the community upon return. And we're even going to discuss today the missing women and missing girls of our community and what that looks like when they're cycled throughout the criminal legal system, sex trafficking system, and all other parts that directly impact us and our community each and every day. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my panelists today. And I'll start with Reverend Sharon White Harrigan. And please introduce yourself in 60 seconds or less and let the world know who you are and how amazing you are with the work that you do.
Well, thank you. Somehow I knew you was going to choose me first. Hello, I am honored and just really pleased to be here in community with all of you. My name is Sharon White Harrigan, official title Reverend. I am the executive director of the Women's Community Justice Association, also known as WCJA. I am a consultant. I am a therapist. I am an adjunct lecturer at City College, and I am also a diehard advocate and activist in this movement for women and gender expansive people in and out of the system.
And we want to thank you and welcome you so much, so much. I want to move it right along so we can get into the conversation, people. Dawn, please come up and introduce yourself to the world, how great you are as well.
Thank you, Dr. V, and thank you, everyone. I'm so honored to be here today. My name is Dawn Rowe. I am the founder and president of Girl Vow. We are an intensive gender-focused mentoring program for incarcerated and foster care youth throughout New York City. And I also oversee a national task force for missing and murdered women and girls of color. And I, too, am an adjunct lecturer at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And I'm going to pass this back to Dr. V. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And last but not least, we want to include Rosalind. Come on in here, jump in the conversation and let the world know who you are and why you're great.
First of all, thank you for having me on this panel with all these amazing women. Um, My name is Rosalind Smith. I am the Beyond Incarceration Program Manager at V-Day, which is a global organization that vows to end violence against women and girls and the planet. I also want to say how important this conversation is today. We're talking about mental health, and a lot of times, women get left behind. So I applaud the advocate that, we're having this platform today and we're including women's issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm super, super excited. And I'm happy that you highlighted that very point. So when we was discussing what today would look like, I said we have to have a panel solely directed for the women needs. Because you're right, Rosalind. So often I sit in boardrooms and courtrooms at city council hearings, and quite often, honestly, I've actually called city council out because I've sat in a hearing and around issues that concern women on the island, and not one council member asks DOC about the detainees on the island, especially around sexual assaults. I remember last year sitting in a hearing where 4 council members, 3 female, 1 male identified, actually asked about officers and sexual assaults. And that is a concern for all of us in our community. However, officers have a union. Officers have access to advocate for themselves. When we talk about advocating for those behind the correctional walls, we're usually speaking about people detained, people without access to things. And so often the women are left out of the conversation. And if the people in position to make change forget us, it is our duty to remind them and hold them accountable. So I'm super excited to have an amazing conversation. And that's what I exactly want this to be. Not a panel, but a conversation between those directly impacted, those doing the work, those closest to those who need our help, our voice, and our advocacy. And so are y'all ready to just enjoy yourselves and converse with me?
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into it. I like to shake things up and hold people accountable. So I'm definitely going to start with Reverend Sharon, because recently, now let me get this right, because I'm all about facts and stats. But recently, an article came out in New York Times, and it spoke about what a feminist jail would look like. And I know, leading the campaign Beyond Rosie's campaign to get the women off the island for the last couple of years, I immediately said, I had to ask Reverend Sharon about this on the panel, because New Yorkers are whispering, and New Yorkers have a lot to say, and they assume things because they don't have direct access to certain leadership or people. But I have you directly here with us today, and I would just love you to address that article. What does a feminist jail look like? And is Beyond Rosie's actually requesting a feminist jail? So please respond to that.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dr. V. So let me just simply say that there's no such thing as a feminist jail. So I just need to put that straight out there. There's no way that you can make a jail and make it feminist or feminine, right? And so that title came out. That wasn't the original title to the article. The original title is Imagining an Alternative to Healing and Justice, which was in the printed version of the New York Times that came out on May 15th. However, the editor decided on, the online version should have, they use these algorithms that, these catchphrases and keywords, so that it sums up to a matter of clicks. So WCJA, nor myself, believe in a feminist jail, and I'm gonna push it even further, that we're not advocating for a jail. We're advocating for a place that people can be at where they can get healed, their traumas can get treated, and mental health can really be addressed in a way that has never been before. So no, we don't believe in a feminist jail. The other thing is, we know that we approve that title of that, but I am going to give a shout out to Jania Belafonte for doing an excellent job in putting that article together, and the heading, Imagining an alternative to healing and justice.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. And I'm super excited to lead the conversation. So now that we know that beyond Rosie's campaign to get the women off of Rikers Island is not necessarily calling for a feminist jail, let's open up the door some more. So the unseen impacts of incarceration on women, missing women, and girls, right? And non-gender conforming individuals is a lot. And it often is clouded when we speak about the population as a whole, because the majority of individuals in New York City Department of Corrections identify as male. And so what does the unseen impacts of incarceration mean? When Very Sharon mentioned something, trauma. What does the unseen impacts of incarceration mean when we know the statistics say 49% of those incarcerated in DOC have a mental health concern? And that breaks down to about 80% of the women. That breaks down earlier, I said in another panel, where 77% of the women coming in to Department of Corrections already are identified as being a victim of at least one sexual assault. So when we talk about trauma, when we speak about the unseen impacts of incarceration on women, just us in this conversation, that's why I'm excited about this panel. What does that mean? Dawn, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. And then, Rosalind, I would like you to jump in as well. I want this to be a real discussion. What does it mean to you for the unseen impacts of incarceration?
When I think about that, Dr. V, and thank you for that, I think there's this idea that women of color don't deserve justice. We don't deserve fairness. We don't deserve equity, that we don't deserve repair in any type of way. So when we think about these injustices and these hidden injustices that are currently, happening to us, I also think about the young people that we work with that are foster care involved, foster care youth, right? So we think about the hidden traumatic experiences that they have. When we think about how that leads them to crossover systems, whether it be incarceration, whether it be being involved in sex trafficking, whether it's looking for someone to love them in all the wrong places, right? And we know oftentimes those particular relationships and finding and looking for someone who doesn't mean, a young person any good, that oftentimes unfortunately leads to sexual assault, abuse, rape. It could lead to incest, and oftentimes that leads to incarceration. You have so many young people that are dealing with chronic pain, and that chronic pain is hidden and it's unseen. And a lot of times, women and girls, unfortunately, we internalize the experiences we have. We're taught in our homes from a very young age not to tell. We're taught to hold on to the pain that we have, and those are some of the larger issues because it becomes a mental health issue, and it's an issue that unfortunately has reared its ugly head because we see it time and time again. So I remember the first time I walked into Rikers Island, and this was back in 2017, and we went into the young adult housing area, and I want to say there were maybe about 50 young women and girls of color, and I remember standing in my tracks just astonished and in shock. And I began to think about how the system is hidden with structural racism, how this system has destroyed us, how this system has taken any opportunity for us to advance beyond mental health, because the system has been designed to fail us and to hurt us and not to help us. And I just want to say a couple of more things. Just looking at the research and looking at the issues of sex trafficking, we know that on average a girl is sex trafficked at the age of 15, but at GirlVal, we work with girls as young as 18. We know that the research also tells us that a young girl that is sex trafficked, her life expectancy is no more than 7 to 10 years. And think about how damning that is. Think about the mental health impact that it has on a young person to be taken from her community and to be stripped of who she is because of systems that are broken and that have consistently failed us. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Dr. V.
Thank you so much. And you almost brought me to tears. Now, I have to back up and apologize because, it's been a long day. It's been a long week, but I'm not going to make excuses. I'm going to hold myself accountable. And I had brain surgery. So bear with me and accept my apology. Rosalind, please come and introduce yourself first and then respond if you have a comment, because I realized I don't believe I gave you the proper time to introduce yourself, right? So please introduce yourself and then respond. Thank you so much.
I did introduce myself.
You did?
Yes.
Oh, girl, it's been a
Yes.
long day. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, no problem. So in
Come on
response
in this
to
conversation, yes.
the hidden effects of mental health and on incarcerated females. So first of all, I just want to say this, like, to start the conversation off, many women that come to prison already have trauma. They come from backgrounds of abuse in the home, abuse in the environment, abuse from intimate partners, abuse from family members, abuse from living in neighborhoods that are not conducive to helping them achieve any kind of mental stability. So after coming home from a period of incarceration, what happens to a person is that they develop coping skills. And the coping skills that they develop are negative coping skills, because many prisons are clearly dangerous places where there's no exit or escape. Prisoners learn quickly to become hypervigilant, and ever alert for signs of threats or personal risk that is going to harm them. So what I found out is that, dependency on institutional structures and contingencies are prevalent when, people come home. Hypervigilance, interpersonal distrust, we have a lot of suspicion, emotional over control. We might want to alienate ourselves. Psychologically, we distance ourselves from people. We have social withdrawal and isolation, and incorporation of exploitative norms of prison culture. If you're in prison for so long, I remember when we went into Rikers Island, one of my colleagues that went in said to me, they were talking to one of the women, and she was there for 3 years waiting to go to court, waiting to be sentenced. She was there for 3 years, and they talked about moving her to Bedford Hills, and the first thing she thought about was, I can't afford to send my stuff there. Not the fact that she's been there 3 years in a hellhole, but the fact that she couldn't afford to send her stuff with her. So these are things that people don't see. The post-traumatic stress reactions to the pains of imprisonment, these are things that people don't see, and that we don't have a conversation about, and that we don't talk about. And a lot of women, when they're inside, they don't get the mental health services that they really need. Rikers, Bedford, all of the jails and prisons say, oh yeah, we help them. But living there and watching it doesn't happen. We intervene. We as sisters intervene on behalf of the people that we know have mental health issues. And I'm not licensed. We're not licensed, but we care. Half of them don't want to take the drugs because they don't want to become zombies. Or, in Black and brown neighborhoods, we see going to a psychiatrist or therapy as taboo. So these are the things that we have to change. I don't want to take up too much time. I have a lot of stuff to say, but these are the things that we have to change and that we have to fight for. And that's why I do the work that I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, yes, really quickly, but I just also want to highlight when Rosalind said Bedford, she was referring to Bedford Hills State Prison, and that transfer was about when the governor decided to remove the women because of the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, they say ongoing on Rikers Island, and move them upstate while still waiting for their trial, a fair day in court, quote unquote, upstate to Bedford Hills Prison. And then the women were actually brought back down to the city, placed into the same conditions that they were said they were moving them from. Reverend Sharon, please jump in.
Yes, so I just want to just uplift my sisters, because y'all spoke, speaking truth to power. And I also think that, when it comes to trauma, that, back in the days, people didn't identify it as trauma, right? It's like, you've been through this thing. Like, mental health was something that if a family member was suffering for something, it was like they chucked it up, oh, they're crazy, or what have you, kept them locked up in the house, or put them away in the psychiatric ward or something of that effect. But right now we understand that mental health affects every single body, and that women, particularly women, we are made to internalize our trauma in different ways. We have to compartmentalize it, right? We have to pack it up like we do our luggage, put it up in the closet and keep it there, because we have to be resilient. And I'm gonna say that word, resilient, every day, right? And the resilient is a word that we generally use it in a specialized context, but now it's an everyday household word, because we have to muster up all the strength that we have day by day to get by, right? Because our needs, the mental health challenges, our trauma are always unmet and not treated, particularly in the system, whether it's jail or prison. Is something about Black women and trauma that seems to not, just not be talked about, right? We talk around it, we talk, within it, but we don't talk about Black women and trauma, the one population that has been affected the most, through time. No, we don't pinpoint it and stick a pin in it and say, this is something we need to address immediately.
Dr. V, can I add to that? I know you said 1 second, but can I just add to what she said really quickly, please? I just want to say that we are in a state of emergency. Like Reverend Sharon, when you were talking, and Rosa, when you were talking, like the first thing that came to my mind is that we're in this state of emergency, and we have been in this state of emergency for a very long time. And there is no one coming to rescue us. There is no one coming to save the day. There is no one coming to help us. Every day we're getting calls from young people and girls that are dealing with intergenerational trauma. And we're talking about trauma after trauma. We're talking about trauma of slavery that has not evaded us at all, and it's up to us to make the change. We can no longer sit and wait for systems of survival, because guess what? They are not coming. And I know, Dr. V, you have this planned out, but I am really like in this moment, because we know what the realities are for our young people. We know what the realities for our women and girls that are behind the walls right now. We know what the realities are for our young people that are being sex trafficked and that are chained and tied to this broken system. And because they're in chronic pain, they can't let go. So I just wanted to say that, and I thank you, Reverend Sharon. I thank you, ladies.
Thank you, both of y'all, everyone. And I'm just super excited. I am just so, for all who know me, know I'm never at a loss for words, but I'm so excited with the energy and the opportunity, because we have a whole panel for ourselves, right? And so when we say that, they don't get the things that they need behind the walls or even in the community, let's go a little deeper. Lack of access to what? Medical? I know I was reading recently, and they were saying across nationwide, about 58,000 women actually enter the correctional system each year already pregnant. And so that is something that Department of Correction should focus on, that doesn't necessarily have to do with the men population, right? And so just take it further, because I've testified on the record of women actually outreaching me because they was forced to perform sexual acts for additional pads. And those are the things that are uncomfortable to have in a conversation when you talk about change, criminal justice reform, and things like that. I remember being at a Board of Correction hearing and saying just that on the record one day. I was saying how an individual reported to me that she was forced to bleed on the floor in her cell, and then not even given additional pads or cleaning supplies to clean up her cell, and stuck there for days. And at the time that she had got someone to reach out to me, she had a clogged toilet in her unit. And I say all of that because as women going through the system, there's an additional layer of hardship. Many of us Black women especially suffer from fibroids. That means heavier periods. That means longer menstruation times. The things that are not discussed on task force meetings and boardroom meetings, but impact the population every single day. And recently, pre-COVID, I believe, or right around the COVID time, City Council passed a bill to give out free sanitary napkins across the city in schools and to make it accessible for everyone, whether they could afford it or not. Amazing. But I thought, you're shortchanging your constituents behind correctional walls because you don't address their access to sanitary napkins that we know they don't receive on a timely basis or when they're supposed to. And I don't want to just harp on that, but it's those type of issues that impact the female population that aren't addressed or even given a moment to be discussed. And so what else do women lack access to or are not given minimum standards for behind the walls that we need to put on the forefront and highlight today? Jump in here.
I think everything. It's a lack of human decency. Honestly, it's not even about, we can sit and pinpoint all day that is a lack of resources, lack of medical accessibility, lack of mental health, it's a lack of human decency. I think people have this preconceived notion or ideologies that women should be barefoot and pregnant in the house. And so when they do wind up through the system, that all of a sudden they should be treated as the lowest thing on the face of this earth. It's my personal experience as a formerly incarcerated woman, that the sanitary pads, the toilet tissue, I'm just saying, even access to healthy food, right? And so because you are incarcerated or detained doesn't mean that you should be deprived of basic human needs and rights. And that is exactly what happened. I became a social worker because when I was incarcerated, there wasn't a social worker. They had psychiatrists, and let me just say, they weren't culturally relatable. Right? So I'm a Black woman, and when my mom died, that you want to send me to a white psychiatrist, right? That you thought would understand what it meant to me that my mom just passed away and I'm locked up for defending myself. It's just I can't even imagine that we in this world today, we're supposed to be so progressive, and we don't have just even the simple basic needs available for people. And then I just want to say this real quickly. We need to stop making the Black community sit with the white community to get our trauma treated. A lot of our trauma historically is from the white community. We need people who are culturally relatable, because you're not going to be able to get all of your trauma treated if you can't even bring up the fact that you feel a way that your ancestors been through some things, and that to this day, you're still going through some of those things that they went through. It's impossible. And I'm going to pass it on to my sisters because I'm hot.
So,
okay?
First of all, we all know that prison, the PIC, prison industrial complex, is an extension of slavery. We also know that the majority of people that are in prison are Black and brown. We also know that during slavery, our women were raped, dejected. We had to take care of the families. We had to do everything. So The prison system is just another form of slavery, and they treat us the same way. We shouldn't have good food. We shouldn't have medical treatment. We should have to fend for everything that we want. And that's exactly what happens. It's a disgrace. And women have so much unique issues. Prison was built for men, first of all. Like, the saddest thing about, like, when I was inside it, I realized that I could get a pair of boxer shorts through the package room because of the directive says that I could have that, but I couldn't get a bra, an underwire bra. It's just ridiculous. The things that go on inside of there that make us so angry and that we advocate for is the medical health. Being misdiagnosed, my co-defendant ended up passing away in prison because they told her she had acid reflux and she had cancer. She died in prison with stage 4 cancer because of that. I myself had suffered from fibroids before I came to prison. When I came to prison, they didn't do anything to help me. I had to barter for sanitary napkins with cigarettes, commissary, food, whatever, to get extra sanitary pads. We had to fight to go to ILC and fight. And that's the inmate liaison committee. We had to fight to get larger sanitary napkins for women that had fibroid issues because the little sanitaries that they weren't giving us was not enough and we couldn't get any more. And then when we went to the RMU, Regional Medical Facility, to get it, we had to sign over our life for a pack of sanitary pads. I also experienced having a hysterectomy because I was told there was no alternatives. And at that time, they were giving out hysterectomies like they were giving out lollipops. So many women experience all of these traumatic things in prison, and it shouldn't be. It's a disgrace, and it's a form of slavery that is continually going on and on and on. And we have to, like Dawn said, nobody's going to help us. We got to help ourselves.
Thank you so much for even sharing your truth on that, Rosalind. And I actually want to bring a point on a national level when we speak about women being incarcerated, because, you know, I've been a doula, a death doula, for over 20 years. And a few years ago, maybe like 4 years now, I became a birth doula. And it was so important to me when I found out the stats of, and even in 2022, it's still like this. Black women die at 4 times the rate of white women in New York State doing childbirth. And so that racial disparity right there alarmed me, right? And so when you was saying about hysterectomies, it reminded me, I believe it was in Georgia a few years back, where the women who was incarcerated in a prison were actually getting hysterectomies unknown to them, thinking they were just having regular procedures done against their own will. And this is in this time, our lifetime, and the federal government was aware of it. And so when we talk about being reminded of slavery, our bodies being misused, even medically, I think years ago, generations ago, Black women were used to learn about female bodies and anatomy. And even when we would practice on or abuse, we weren't even given painkillers because it was assumed that we couldn't really relate to pain. And so in that sense, we weren't even really identified as human beings in a way. And I just really want, you know, Dawn to come in here and really talk about what it looks like for racial disparities on a national level when we talk about the women incarcerated. Who are we incarcerating? Because they're vulnerable, right? They're our nurturers. They're our futures in our community. And I say that because so often I know from foster care, and I said this in a previous panel today, that when it came to homelessness, actually, I used to sleep on Coney Island Beach underneath the sliding board. I slept on a train to not be raped in foster care. And so often I know that door is led open into how young girls end up being sex trafficked or end up with doing sex work. And it's the trauma of what they're trying to escape from that they get caught up in the cycle and pushed throughout the criminal legal system, or ending up in some type of horror, which Dawn, the task force, I really want to bring in and you to explain to everyone why it's so important for the Missing Women and Girls Task Force. So on a national level, can you just touch on why it's super important for us to stay aware of what incarceration looks like for Black and brown women?
Yeah, and I just also, thank you, Dr. V. I just also want to add that we have to remember that incarcerated girls become incarcerated women. Foster care youth girls become incarcerated women. We have to really break the cycle. In order to do that, we have to address the issues of foster care. We have to address the issues of sex trafficking. We have to address the issues of juvenile justice. That's the only way we're gonna be able to break the cycle, so that we don't have women incarcerated. At work, our specific work with the task force is really, we really want to be able to address the issues of missing and murdered girls of color, looking at the policies, looking at systems in terms of what's working and what's not. We know that oftentimes, if you are homeless, that police can be subjective in terms of whether or not they even want to take a police report, right? If you've been formerly incarcerated, they might not decide that you're worthy enough of a police report. And so thinking about it on a national level, if you're considered even quote unquote a runaway, right? Or you just might be deemed a runaway because you're of a certain age or you're from a certain system, right? And they may just deem that you're a runaway because of that, because of what you look like, because of race, because of skin color. And so our work on a national level is really to be able to address those issues and help other organizations who don't have the capacity to address those issues, because it's time that we actually get our states to really sit down and look at the issues of missing and murdered women and girls of color, look at the issues of sex trafficking, look at the fact that, you know, women and girls of color, or just women in general, that if they abuse, or once they're abused, if they actually decide that they want to defend themselves in any type of way from their captor, that they're more than likely to end their life. I think of the case, their life is more likely to be ended. Excuse me. I think of the case of Crystal Kaiser. She was a 16-year-old girl who she was being abused by her sex trafficker. She killed him and she was given a life sentence. We know the case of Centonia Brown, right? And she is one of those cases that have, you know, been able to make it out of the system. But think about all the cases where women and girls have not been able to make it out of the system, and actually they've gone deeper into the system. So we think about this work on a national level. We think about the conversations that's not being had when it comes to women and girls of color being incarcerated due to sex trafficking, due to hidden injustices, and also due to many facets of trauma. And just thinking about how child welfare in general has oftentimes failed our young people of color. I mean, we have, matter of fact, there's a stats that we were looking at a couple of weeks ago, some research, and the research told us that 86% of the girls and the women that are incarcerated come from the foster care system, or 86% of the women who have been dealing with sex trafficking come from the foster care system. And those are staggering. Those are staggering statistics that we really need to take a look at, so we can disable them and disarm what has happened to our women and girls.
Absolutely. I am loving the conversation. Are y'all still with me right now? Are y'all feeling the energy? Yes, absolutely. Yes. I want to bring it back to a little local direction. I appreciate you touching a little bit on the national side, Dawn, and we'll get back to it. But Reverend Sharon, Beyond Rosie's is a conversation that we have to keep highlighting, because it disgusts me in 2019 when the vote to close Rikers occurred. Happy to make that happen. But in the plans, the women were set to be the last removed off the island. Yet one of the smallest population sets, but set to be the last off the island. So I also remember in 2019, I believe the article and the story came out, I think it was with New York One, I think, around the Lincoln Center. What is the vision for Lincoln, and how can that be effective today if the governor would open up the doors for our women of New York City?
Well, yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, the Beyond Rosies, we feel like, the Beyond Rosies actually came out with the Close Rikers campaign. What about the women? So the women are slated to leave last 2027 to Kew Gardens, to this, fancy state of the art, building with the same offices, right? So we're recycling the offices. So what people don't realize, that it's not about a building, right? We are looking at Lincoln Correctional because it's a closed prison that is not being used. It's by Central, across the street from Central Park. It can be repurposed. It can be renovated. The bars can be removed, and that can be a place for some women to go, because the biggest part of the Beyond Rosie's campaign is decarceration, right? Getting these women, gender expansive folks, gender non-conforming, trans women off of Rikers Island, out of the Rose M. Singer Center, and they can go into alternatives in the community that is underutilized, right? And so we're saying that instead of spending all of this money building some high-tech jail, that we can have a healing center right here in the community, surrounded by community-based organizations that can be helpful in the process. Because what people don't understand is this: women at the Rose M. Singer Center, 300 or less as a population at this place, and neither or any of their trauma has been addressed or treated in a way that is going to help them be on the road, right, to healing, and to be on the road to wellness, right? And so what we'll find, again, it went back to my earlier conversation a little while ago, is that you have all of these, white therapists, psychiatrists, people that are treating the Black community. That's not helpful. We're looking at changing Lincoln to a place of healing, surrounded by cultural related people, not ran by DOC in a way that is Rikers is happening now, but we are looking at it being ran by a non-for-profit or organization that can provide the necessary services and resources that will be helpful for the women. The women can be there. The children could come visit. They could come stay the night, that they can cook their own food. These are people, you're talking about housing people that are detained right now, and the operative word is detained, right? These are people who allegedly committed a crime. Now, we understand there's some people that do need the next level of services and the next level of care. And that's what we're talking about, because the rest of the population can be decarcerated into the community. There is alternatives that take women with violent crimes, and they have been successful, right? There are women right now that are that's in alternatives, that go to court when they're supposed to. They go to work, they go to school, because the problem is we don't invest in the people. When I say we, society, we don't invest in the people that is the core and the root of the community, and that's the women. Let's not get it twisted, folks. You hear men say, oh, that's my queen and this and that. We are the heart, the pulse, the root of the community. We are in the workplace, we're in school, we are changing diapers, we are rearing children, we're making their dinner, helping them with their homework, and let's push it further. We're changing the batteries in the remote because the men don't even know where the batteries are kept. Let's keep it where it is. I don't want to, get this thing twisted. And this is not to diminish men's part, but to say that it's the women that keep things going, and they are the least invested in. And that's what Beyond Rosie's is about. Investing in the women to get them on the path to healing. Because when you invest in the women, you are investing in the family. You are investing in the men. You are investing in the children. You are investing in everything, because the women are the ones that are at the forefront of it all.
Woo! Yes. Listen, you all are powerful.
We need a
That's
round of applause for this.
I know that's right?
Serious.
Okay, Reverend Sharon, I didn't ask you to come preach, but you are definitely preaching and teaching to the nation today, and I am here for it. I am super, super excited. I think that, let me just pause for a second. I believe that right now there is so much the city could do. And I know you all agree with me. And so I want to do a quick round in 60 seconds or less. What do you believe should be included in the city's plan, like the mayor's task force, the new mayor's agency task force, or Commissioner Molina's plan on moving forward regarding the women on Rikers Island and non-gender conforming people on Rikers Island? Jump in here. Let's go 60 seconds or less. Roz, please take it off. What do you think should be added or focused on?
Well, the trauma-informed care, I think, is the most important issue because, like I said before, everybody who has experienced incarceration comes from a trauma-informed background. We need resilient building practices in our communities, our schools, our public health departments, social services, faith-based organizations, and criminal justice systems, meaning the prisons, jails, and detention centers. And also, I think that, it's important that we really uplift women and we really pay attention to the issues that women are going through. I mean, look what's happening now with the Roe v. Wade. That says it right there. These leaders in our United States of America don't care about women, and we need to start caring. We need to have more rallies. We need to just get out there and let them know that we are unstoppable and we are a force to be reckoned with.
Thank you. Dawn, you want to jump in?
I know you mentioned early on about this feminist approach, or feminist jail rather. And as I was listening to you, Dr. V and Reverend Sharon, I'm like, yes, we might not want a feminist jail, but we definitely need a feminist approach. We need a gender focused approach, because what we have right now is not working. We need real investments. If we're going to have real investments, we have to talk about livable wages, so that when people that are incarcerated on Rikers Island or wherever they're incarcerated at, that once they come out of incarceration, that they have real systems of support. They need mentors. They need mental health therapists. They need life coaches, right? So all those things have to happen if we really want to see reform, like reform is supposed to happen. I think that we also need training and tech programs. Let's think about the reality of the world that we live in, and let's prepare them for that. And if we look at technology, we know that is the best route to go in order to prepare and train people on how to advance beyond the incarceral system, so they can move beyond that pain and the chronic pain that we've talked about, and they can move beyond racism and the structures that have been put in place to make them to fail, not only temporarily, but permanently. I think those are the kind of investments that we need.
Ooh, powerful. Thank you so much. Reverend Sharon, come on in here.
I'm just jumping. I'm piggybacking off of them. We need to invest in people and the women, and we need to invest in the people and not trees in the middle of the highway, right? We need to raise up the community. We need more services and resources in the community. We need to be able to stop the violence that's happening on the street. We need to be able to be armed with our own toolbox, right? We don't need to be policed in that manner. We need to be able to raise our community up to take care of our community. And that's going to take investment. We need our people to take care of our people. So my message is, right, let all of the community come together, utilize the community. There's people here that are willing, ready to do the work, have been doing the work. Bring them to the table and let them eat too. Bring them, allow them to be a part of the planning process. Allow them to help make these policies. Allow them to come and create all of the things that is needed within our communities. You know, nothing without us, nothing for us without us, right? Or nothing about us without us, right? And that's just as simple as it gets, right? Invest in the people.
I just
thank you. Hold on, one. Let me just say one.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
No, it's just real quick. And also, you know, I just want to add to that. We have to think about preventative measures instead of being reactive. We have to think about how we can stop mass incarceration at its door so we don't keep sending more Black and brown women and men back to prison. That's all I wanted to say.
I totally agree. And I just want to highlight that Rikers Island is a local jail. And so often people get that confused when we talk about correctional systems in a whole. And so I just want to let you all know out there that Rikers Island and the boat are local jail facilities. And so it should not matter when it comes to people's human rights and basic minimum standards to be met. But I really want to highlight that this is occurring in a local jail, although it doesn't seem like a jail, and it's occurring when the jail has the most staff in our nation when it comes to local jails and correctional staffing. And it's occurring when we have a board of correction oversight that's supposed to hold the Department of Correction accountable, right? I also want to highlight, and you know, I almost lost my train of thought. City Council is listening to the public today testify on the Department of Corrections budget or the need for it, or why we don't, as advocates, believe the budget should be increased, or why we as advocates don't believe they need an additional almost 600 officers. What would you all say in 60 seconds or less to City Council to highlight the importance of the women, to highlight the importance of holding DOC accountable, and to highlight where funding that they are responsible for allocating should go? Because so often we use phrases like, we need more resources, and I'm gonna hold this panel accountable because you've all said it. So you've all mentioned we need more resources in the community. We need more resources behind the wall. So I'm going to ask you in 60 seconds or less, what are those resources? Because we are talking to people who are in position to make change. Let's be clear. So when they see this message, if they're watching now or later, they need to know that we as the experts in this field have let them publicly know, since we couldn't make the meeting today, since we was honoring Khalif Browder's name and birthday today and had this event on this day for that reason. What is the important thing for them to know about the women, and where in the community should they put resources instead of giving them to the Department of Corrections? Reverend Sharon, please.
Oh, they should definitely put it within the 5 boroughs. And when we talk about resources, that women, especially women, should have access to great, not just good, mediocre, great medical care. They should have access to healthy food, right? Without having to steal it or, you know, get on food stamps. They should be able to get access to all of the things that help feed the family, that helps move the family. They should have access to housing, not just supportive housing, but housing where they could take care of their family. They should have access to education, vocation. They should have access to computer training. They should have access to financial empowerment. They should have access to all of these things that's going to be able to rise them up and put them on the road, right, to positive, healthy living.
Ooh, thank you so much. And I really, you mentioned a lot of things that I really want to just throw in here with this question, because I forgot to make this point. The speaker this week mentioned, I made it in another panel, mentioned creating trauma recovery centers for each borough. And when I heard her say that or read that, her tweet, I thought immediately that is what each facility in Rikers and the boat needs: trauma recovery centers. And so I believe you covered a bit, but I wanted to throw that in the question. And so Dawn and Rosalind, please jump in here. What can you tell City Council that they need to do focus on the women and where they should allocate funds?
Remember, I always focus on women and girls, young women and girls of color, because as I said before, young women and girls of color become incarcerated women and girls of color. So my focus is always going to be beginning with young people. And I want to really start with the education. The education system has failed our young people tremendously. I've walked into Rikers Island and young people can't even tell time. I've helped young girls young adults on Rikers Island learn how to read. So the education has failed our young people tremendously. So there needs to be a real alternative to education programs for those that are impacted, so that way they can learn the necessary skills that they need in order to survive. The other thing that I want to say is that there needs to be a crisis center. You touched on it, Dr. Green. Dr. Green. You touched on it, Dr. Victoria. But there needs to be a crisis center throughout every borough for women and for girls that they can specifically go to. And it needs to be gender focused, because our concerns and our needs are so very different than the male population. So those things are very vital in order to making sure that we can survive.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Roz, you want to jump in here?
I just wanted to add in that, the 5 boroughs we all think about, but the upstate communities deal with a whole lot of trauma as well. And the women up there don't get a lot of services that they need. So I think we need to look farther than the 5 boroughs. And like mostly everybody said, the local mental health community gardens. I think there's a lot of abandoned buildings in New York that the state has that could be given to the community to fix up, either for housing, for centers, for youth community centers. There's just so much wrong that the city can do to help us out. Like, I walk around my block and I see abandoned spaces and abandoned lots. And what happens in 3 or 4 years? They're building affordable houses that nobody in my community can afford. So let's use the spaces that we have in our communities to do good for the communities.
Can I just say, I love what you said about that, Rosalind, because the problem is that we invest in developers, right? So we invest in people that already have the money, that already have the resources, and we forget about the people that need it the most. So when you said that, there's these buildings and stuff that pop up and then we can't afford to live there, they very well know that. So we have to get out the pockets of rich people and focus on the people that need it the most, the people that have actually put certain others in office. I think that's really important.
Woo, you hit the nail. We don't even need a hammer.
Did I act up?
Get out the pocket.
Yes,
get out of the pockets of the rich people. Follow the money and you'll follow why no results is happening, right?
Or that they do something humane do something right and good with their money, right?
And when you deter from their mission, you lose that funding. I am so happy that we're wrapping this up on that note, because that's why it's so important to have another conversation like this. Because I see you, Roz, but that's why it's so important to have another conversation like this, because so often our needs is overlooked because it's not a part of the funder's agenda. It's not a part of what the funder thinks is pretty, what they want to attach themselves to, who they want to attach themselves to. And Dawn, you said something. I'm going to take it a step further. Stop overlooking the grassroots who build up the movement. Stop overlooking them. Stop using us. I'm going to say us because I'm one of the grassroots. Stop using us to build the foundation. Get the funding and come trample over our work and act like it's your own. That does anything to uplift us as a people. That does anything to uplift us as entrepreneurs, to get away out of this, to get out of the system of white supremacy, to build our own communities up. Because when we build ourselves up solid, we don't have to answer or buckle down to white supremacy, because we can stand on our own. We can be on our own. Raj, jump in here. Go ahead.
No, I just thought about too that, we have to educate our community as well, because I realize that there's, we have community boards every month that we could go to, we could sit on, we could see what's happening out there. And we have to get the community involved in that so we could speak up and say, no, we're not going to have this freaking affordable building that we can't get in. We want a community center. We want a community garden. We don't want this space used for that. And if we come together and have our voices heard, we could change a whole lot of things.
Yep.
That's what I want to say.
Thank you. And I want to say, and I'll follow up and finish with, I think what you just stated was extremely important. And I know from a meeting that I had last week that even now the city doesn't really want to keep its promise. And when I say that, I mean about the women. And, we was told a couple of years ago that the women would have their own facility. And now the city is trying to talk about combining the women with men into a facility. And so I would encourage everyone to hold your electeds accountable in your own district, to question them about where the women will be and what that will look like in your own district if they come in contact with the criminal legal system. And Ross touched on something, the community board. I encourage everyone to go to your community board meeting, whether it's where you live or where you work. Join them, because you can make votes around even things about real estate developers coming into your community and whether or not they can build. And if they are voted to allow to build, how many units will go for low income and what that unit will actually look like. Because in another panel, or maybe it was this panel, Dawn, I think it was you, said something about $80,000 being low income. That's not, maybe it was another panel, I don't remember. It's been a lot of panels today. But that is not considered low income in Black and brown communities. And so even that means that we're being pushed out of our community. And that has to be highlighted. I just want to say that there is so much things we can do. Get involved at the Board of Corrections. If you have a loved one or you're directly impacted what's going on in New York City Department of Corrections, there is an oversight board. They meet every second Tuesday of the month, except for August and December. Log on. You can speak your truth. The Jails Action Coalition, actually a couple of years ago, made it possible. There was not even a public comment when we started advocating for people behind the walls, but we made it possible so that you get 3 minutes, sometimes it's 5 minutes, to speak on the record about your truth. Organize in your communities. If you can't go to a meeting, organize where someone is off and can speak for the community. There are so many things to get involved. Get involved with the Justice for Women Task Force. Get involved with the murdered Black and missing girls task force. Dawn, you can fix the name if I messed it up. Get involved with the Jails Action Coalition, the Halt Solitary. There's so many different things that you can do right now in your city. Whether you have $1 to donate, you can also donate your time. If you don't want to show up, you can print out flyers for us. You can make calls to assembly and senators. There are so many different ways as a community for you to get involved in at your own level of comfort. There is no reason to make excuses anymore for why you're not doing your part. Solomon, jump in here.
Thank you so much, Dr. V, and thank you so much to Rosalind, to Dawn, and Reverend Sharon for your amazing sharing today. I learned so much hanging back and watching the conversation, inspired by your passion to connect the dots around how our community works together and how we, across genders, can be unified in bringing the quality of healthy life that we need. And I think it's amazing to have shared this whole day with everyone. From top to bottom, we were able to talk about the inner workings of what people call the box and the pain of solitary confinement, to the way that people get engaged, and then the nuance of the nurturers in our world who are suffering in a pipeline that goes directly from foster care into the criminal justice system. And this can't be anymore. And so we're here at the Office of the Public Advocate to be accountable, to let the truth be spoken by those who know it best. And it was thus made so today by all of you. And so Many blessings. Peace to everyone. If there's any parting words that y'all folks want to share, now's the time. If you want to plug the organization that you're about, put it into the chat room. Yeah, I'll just give one more minute if anyone wants to say any final.
I'm just going to say, let's get the women off of Rikers Island.
And that
do that
is
ASAP
where
right now.
it should go. So you heard it here first. The governor, we want Lincoln Correctional Facility to belong to the Department of Correction so that we can make a healthy healing space for women. That's first, and there's much more to come. So New York City, thank you again for tuning in. And to the women who lead this movement, thank you so much for your continued resilience. Many blessings.
Peace and blessings.
Peace, everyone.
Visionaryv.com. Visionaryv.com.